want. Hello, thank you again for joining me. This time this is going to be all about unreasonable demands. I am going to be looking at my current top 5 wants list. Items that are mostly out of my price range, but a boy can dream. This is all about me.
I asked and I better get.
Number 5, Martin, by George Romero, the novelisation of the filmmaker's 1976 classic, which the director himself claimed to be his favourite of all his own titles, and this tends to be borne out by the public and critical reaction to this film. Martin is the story of a disturbed young man who believes himself to be a vampire. Romero novelisations do tend to be fairly hard to get hold of, although Dawn of the Dead was conveniently the subject of a fairly recent reprint. I was lucky enough to be able to get hold of that edition. But Martin itself, the least I've seen it going for is 50 quid. It's more often around the £100 mark, and that is a fantastic bit of cover art, making this quite an enviable item. Number 4, The Crumbling Fortress by Willi Heinrich. Heinrich was best known as the author of Cross of Iron, otherwise known as The Patient Flesh or The Willing Flesh, which was famously filmed with slightly loose adherence to the storyline in 1976 by Sam Peckinpah. Heinrich, unlike certain other successful war authors, did have the credentials to back it up, having been a veteran of a Jaeger regiment in the Russian campaign of the Second World War. He wasn't strictly a career war author. He did diversify into other genres as his career went on. Less known to English audiences of his war-themed titles, The Crumbling Fortress doesn't come up for sale very often. It was published in 1963, the original title, Alte Hillers sterben nicht. This title, like Cross of Iron and his other war novel, The Savage Mountain, is set against a backdrop of impending military defeat. And this one concerns itself with the plight of 2 Swiss volunteers in the German army in the summer of 1944, contemplating the meaning of their endeavours as the US Army juggernaut draws ever closer to them. Number 3, Witch House by Evangeline Walton. I remember seeing copies of this in the bookshops decades ago and being completely freaked out by this cover illustration, a rendering of a classic archetypal ding-dong wicked witch materialising out of the mirror in some creepy old mansion and menacing this kind of strange-looking Shirley Temple type of wee brat here, who looks almost as unsettling as the witch does. I mean, who dresses their kids like that? Anyway, this is Betty Ann, and what else would she be called, really? It's set in a lonely old house in New England, in which the adults of the house fancy that Betty Ann here is undergoing childish tantrums, while the kid herself feels like she is being menaced by this malevolent spirit. Originally published in 1945, this work was the first full-length novel to be published by the Lovecraftian Arkham House imprint, and is generally held in high esteem as an effective haunted house tale. Number 2, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors by John Burke. This is the novelisation of the 1965 Amicus portmanteau film, which features the ubiquitous Peter Cushing as Dr. Shrek, the last bloke you'd want to get stuck in a train compartment with, who flips out his tarot cards and spells out a dismal future for each of his travelling companions, who naturally include Christopher Lee, who's a malign art critic. There's a place in hell for art critics in these portmanteau films, and who gets menaced by a disembodied hand. It's also Alan Fluff Freeman, the famous DJ, who gets into gardening difficulties, and best of all, Biff Bailey, played by a young Roy Castle. Biff is a jazz trumpeter, who lands a residential gig in the West Indies, but he unwisely rips off a tune that he overhears at a nighttime voodoo ceremony for use in his own repertoire. As it turns out, Damballa is a jealous god. Number 1, The Black Gestapo by Joseph Nazel. Nazel seems to have been almost a go-to biographer for African American celebrity during a certain period, I'm guessing spanning from the 70s maybe to the early 90s. He's covered such subjects as Richard Pryor, B.B. King and Magic Johnson, but he's also the author of a number of action novels, including such titles as My Name is Black, Black Fury and the Iceman series. And in 1975 he landed the enviable gig of novelising this notorious film, which was directed by Lee Frost, and which tells the story of a kind of inner city protection force which is raised by the well-meaning General Ahmed in order to alleviate the exploitation of the people of Watts at the hands of the mob. But his ruthless, over-ambitious Deputy Colonel Koja chooses to mould his own specialised protection unit into a power-crazed, unscrupulous kind of goon squad. Now, this film first came to my attention, I think, sometime in the 90s when Ice-T on British television, he dressed up in a pimp suit. He did a special on soul cinema or blaxploitation films. This title came up as being sort of indicative of the decline of the genre. A cinematic phenomenon that began with the likes of Sweet Sweetback's badass song Shaft and Superfly, but ended up in these grindhouse kind of churnouts. Now, possibly the Black Gestapo may have been trying to make a serious point, if we're charitable. I mean, you could read into it that it's a comment on militancy arising for legitimate reasons, but there being a danger of this being corrupted into something equally as malign as what it's seeking to replace, possibly. But in reality, this film is kind of a crashingly ham-fisted effort. It's crammed with gratuitous violence, nudity, out of context taboo political symbolism, and a castration scene that will make your eyes water. Its reputation as an under-the-counter kind of bad taste bit of cinematic slurry is fairly well deserved. Anyway, little did I know there was a novel of it, which I would love to read, but never seen it for under about 120 quid. Nazil, incidentally, is also the author of a title called The Black Exorcist. I'm not clear if this is a novelisation of the notorious Abbey, which was kind of a soul cinema riff on The Exorcist, which at the time was kind of slapped down by big studio lawyers for its similarity. I'm not clear if this Nazil title is the novel of that film, but probably merits further investigation. So there we are, some of this is probably pie in the sky, who knows, but should you notice any of these popping up at any sort of reasonable price, you may choose to buy them for yourself, but that would be greedy. You should alert me first. Thank you.